Here's my honest Bang & Olufsen H95 review, and I'm going to compare it against most of its competition, such as the Foldable Batiste, the Bowers & Wilkins PX8, PX7S3, and more. Alright, so it's been a long time coming that the H95 has been featured on my desk, but we had a lot of exciting new headphone models come out that took priority, but now we're doing the full review with the H95 in mid-2025 with the perspective of the brand new models such as the Sony XM6, the Bowers & Wilkins PX7S3, and then some. So I think we can give a really well-rounded perspective on the H95. So let's start with comfort. These weighed in at 333.2 grams on my scale, which is on the heavier end for this class. Now, when it comes to the H95, I do find these to be one of the more comfortable headphones, but I will say they are not elite comfort such as the Bose QC Ultra, which I have over to the right here, which are a lot lighter and have better, more plush cushioning on the headband and on the ear pads. Now, my biggest gripe with the H95 will be that there's not a ton of interior space inside the ear cup. So my ears are slightly pressing against the fabric here, much like the Sony XM6, which I also do have over to the side here. So my ears are touching against that fabric on the inside. Now, I do think that the ear pad cushions themselves are this lambskin leather, which is high quality, but to be honest, they could use more depth. They could use a little bit more plushness because they're kind of thin. Now, the headband is also something that reminds me of another headphone here, which is the Cambridge Audio P100. Now, what's really interesting about the Cambridge Audio is that these two headphones have almost a very similar design, and they actually look the same when you're wearing them on your head, as you can see here, with kind of like that sticking out look, which I don't love. I said that the P100 looks a little bit goofy when you're wearing them, and I still stand by that, but it's not the biggest deal in the world if you don't care about other people's opinions. That said, this headband uses this fabric material. It's not leather, and to be honest, it could use more cushioning. So overall, I still do find these comfortable once you get used to the weight and once you get used to wearing them. They're still lighter than the AirPods Max, for example, but they are on the heavier end. So I'm between a 4 and a 4.5 for comfort, but I'm going to actually give them a 4.5 because personally, I do find these to be one of the more comfortable headphones. All right, so moving on to features, build quality, battery life, and noise canceling performance, which will combine into a single score. The most important thing that you should know about these is that these were released in September 2020. So these are almost 5 years old at this point. That said, these are not lacking for features. These do have adaptive noise canceling, transparency mode. You can turn those off. These also have Dolby Atmos support, which is quite rare for the headphones in this class to have that official Dolby Atmos, which is a nice touch. It's something that the AirPods Max has, for example. All right, before I forget, these include one of the most premium, if not the most premium case in this class, which helps to justify that price a little bit. This is actually a metal case. So I have not had a headphone that has something other than the premium hardshell case, which is usually made of fabric, but here we have a metal case, which is again one of the reasons to perhaps slightly justify that price. But you know, we'll get into value later in this video. But you can see the interior here. You see that these do fold and they collapse, so they do take up a smaller footprint than you would expect. And inside of that case, you do have a stereo cable, you do have the USB-C to USB-A charging cable, and you have the airplane adapter, which is still wrapped up in plastic here. So moving on to battery life, these get 38 hours with noise canceling on and 50 hours with noise canceling off, which is firmly above average for this class, where most of these headphones are between 24 to 30 hours with that noise canceling on. All right, so moving on to build quality, which is definitely the strong point of these headphones and one of the reasons to maybe try to justify that price tag. So we have this really nice textured brushed metal on the headband, on the hinges, on the ear cups themselves, and when you see these in person, they really do look beautiful, and these remind me of a MacBook Pro. So aside from that, you have the lambskin leather ear pad cushions, but then you have this fabric here where you have the leather on the exterior headband, but you do have this kind of cheaper fabric, in my opinion, that is contrasted on the headband. But overall, when it comes to build quality, the only other headphones that really compete would be something like the AirPods Max, maybe the PX8, the Foldable Batiste, but to be honest, I think the H95 is in a league of its own for build quality. Okay, so lastly, the noise canceling performance. Now, this is one of the disadvantages to this headphone. Having been released in 2020, almost 5 years ago at this point, there has been innovation in noise canceling where it's been pushed forward. And to be honest, I think that the noise canceling on the H95 for me is actually a little bit above average. I actually found them to be pretty effective for the frequencies that I personally want to tune out. If I want to tune out hearing people speak and hearing people talking, I think that these do a good job of filtering out the right frequencies. But as far as the effectiveness in 2025, there are better options today. But to be honest, I still find the noise canceling to be better than both the Focal Batiste and the Bowers & Wilkins PX8, which is not really saying too much because they're not really good in those areas, but at least for this high-end expensive class, it actually has some of the better noise canceling. But to be honest, there are better options in 2025. So overall, for features, build quality, battery life, and noise canceling performance, I give the H95 a 4.5 out of 5. All right, so let's talk about sound quality, which is going to be a big factor on whether these are worth and above or not. So sound quality, let's start by talking about the EQ. These come with a very interesting EQ where it's not your typical EQ with the bands that you can select the different frequencies and you can increase or decrease the decibels. This actually has a circular kind of easy to use EQ for consumers where you can choose how bright or how warm you want these to sound, and basically you can select a point on this circle and it's going to morph the sound. So it's a little bit of a really cool implementation and theory, if you ask me. I think that for most consumers who don't know how to EQ, which is pretty much most average users and listeners, I think that this is actually really cool in theory. But to be honest, I wish that we would just get something like the brand new Nothing Headphone 1, which has one of the most advanced EQs on the market. It's an 8-band EQ. You can control the Q parameter, and it's just awesome because you can have full control. Because the truth is, I think the H95 has pretty good hardware when it comes to the drivers, okay? I think that these sound good when it comes to the raw technical sound quality, but an EQ that was more in-depth, that was more advanced, and someone like myself could take full advantage of that hardware, I think would actually do wonders for the H95. Now, stock tuning, V-shaped, consumer friendly. So when I was comparing a very interesting trio, which is the Focal Batiste, the H95, and interestingly, not the PX8, but the cheaper Cambridge Audio P100, which sounds excellent, I actually found the P100 to be the most crisp and detailed and clear out of the box when it comes to stock sound. I found the Batiste to actually be a little bit of the more muffled of these three. Now, if we're including the PX8, which has a very warm, lush sound signature, this would easily be the most muffled out of these four headphones right here that we're talking about, which I think these are some of the best sounding wireless noise canceling headphones, by the way, which is why I want to bring these up specifically. So the H95 is one of the more resolving and treble forward headphones, including having this very large, impactful sub bass that is still pretty clean, if you ask me. So very V-shaped, very consumer friendly out of the box. It's not as balanced as something like the Focal Batiste or the Cambridge Audio P100, but it's actually probably the most exciting and engaging headphone to listen to. So here's the truth about the sound quality of the H95. I think it's firmly tied with the P100, perhaps even in some cases slightly worse, but that's because the P100 has a really good EQ, just like the Nothing Headphone 1, and is one of the best EQs that you have full control and flexibility over, almost aside from the Q factor. Now, the H95, again, I go back to this EQ. It's nice in theory because it's like not intimidating, but it limits the potential we can squeeze out of the H95. The good news is I like the way the H95 sounds right out of the box because it's already consumer friendly. So for your modern music, it's going to have the bass, it's going to have clear cutting treble. The treble is a little bit peaky in the sibilance region and the treble region. So that is why I personally EQ it to smooth it out, but you also lose a little bit of that crisp detail, something that the P100 has more clarity and crisp sound to that treble without having that sibilance. Now, the Focal Batiste to me is more balanced, it's warmer, it's smoother than the H95, and with EQ, the Batiste I think also takes a little bit of a step forward as well when it comes to the sound quality. I think the raw sound quality of the Batiste is better than the H95 as well, but it's very slight. So with these headphones, whether it's the H95, the PX8, the Batiste, the P100, if you listen to these headphones in wired mode, it is actually impressive how good these wireless noise canceling headphones are sounding today. And it's starting to get towards that level of the wired headphones. Now, again, these headphones, they're not meant to be listened to in wired mode, but just to hear that increase in their sound quality tells us that these are actually really good headphones, wireless or not. Remember, these were released in 2020. I think when these were released, and for the time that it was released, where you didn't have new headphones like the Sony XM6, which honestly, all of these headphones for the most part sound better than the Sony XM6, but you have the newer PX7S3, which also is competitive with the H95, competitive with the Nothing Headphone 1, the AirPods Max, etc. Now we have more competition. Okay, so we'll talk about that in value section, but these two actually have very similar sound signatures. The PX7S3 is the most V-shaped Bowers & Wilkins out of the box, the most treble and bass forward, and the H95 is a very similar sound profile right out of the box. As far as to which one does it better, I still slightly lean towards the H95, which I find to be a little bit more resolving and detailed, but to be honest, it's a coin toss. Either of these are going to sound very similar in terms of sound quality. So overall, when it comes to the sound quality of the H95, again, it's one of the more exciting, engaging headphones to listen to. It's not perfect, to be honest. I really do like how it has a decently wide soundstage and stereo separation, especially with that Dolby Atmos, giving it that spatial audio that's on par with the AirPods Max, but having higher sound quality than the AirPods Max. These headphones, honestly, they sound good for what they are. They are engaging. They're exciting to listen to. I really enjoy these headphones to listen to, but then we'll talk about the price next. So for sound quality, I give the H95 a 9.3 out of 10 after EQ, which is definitely one of the higher scores given out in the wireless noise canceling class. All right, so moving on to value, this is the real elephant in the room. So these currently retail at, which is insane because these came out in 2020, and I believe when they were released, they retailed at back then. So why the price went up, I don't know, but they're still being sold today. They're still being manufactured, and they're still available to buy brand new today. So that must mean that, these are still a relevant and current product despite being updated with the H100, which is even more expensive. At the time of this recording, the H100 is eye-watering amount, okay? So going back to the B&O H95, you can find these market price brand new for less than one, which thankfully that helps us a little bit more in the value equation but let's just talk about the market price, which is just under the time of this recording. Honestly, you can find so much better values today because one, these are old. So, being almost 5 years old, there's just simply newer headphones like the Bowers & Wilkins PX7S3, like the Sony XM6, both that we even have the Nothing Headphone 1 for just that is going to have comparable noise canceling performance, that's going to have almost comparable sound quality after EQing. Again, this has the most advanced EQ I've seen to date with really good hardware from Kef. So these are actually a surprise contender. Now, the real problem that's been for all of these headphones in this class is the budget Cambridge Audio P100 at under that sounds just as good, if not slightly better than the H95. This throws a wrench into things as well. And of course, we have value stalwarts like the Sennheiser Momentum 4 at hundreds, which, sound quality wise, if you're just a casual listener, maybe you might think that the Momentum 4 sounds as good as the H95. Although I personally disagree, but with EQ, Momentum 4 sounds very, very good in 2025. Okay, so for value, I'm going to take kind of a mix between what the market price is right now and then what you can find these for used in like new condition. And I give these a 2.5 out of 5 for value, which is one of the lowest scores I've given out for this class of headphones, honestly. But the reasons why it does justify at least a 2.5 in my opinion is that these have the best build quality I've seen, bar none. So again, these are like a MacBook Pro in a headphone form. I mean, these almost cost as much as a MacBook Pro, so they should. And in addition to that build quality, they do sound very good. And to me, their noise canceling is a cut above the Batiste and the PX8, which for me just doesn't really cut it, if you ask me. So out of the elite high-end headphones, it's one of the better overall packages when it comes to the noise canceling, sound quality, build quality, everything. So it is a very, very good product. It's just the price is so high that that's where it just loses its points. But if we take price out of the equation, I do think these are a solid over-ear wireless noise canceling headphone. Even in 2025, I still find these to be one of my personal picks for my overall. If I could only have one, the H95 might be in the running. Okay, so rounding out the total scores here, we give the H95 an 8.3 out of 10. So it is mixed. It is tough because of that price and that value score really weighing everything else down. As an overall product, I'm a fan of the H95. I have not tested the H100. I'd love to get my hands on it. I have a feeling I would also love the H100 if it takes a step forward in the right direction, but for probably not enough of a step in the right direction to choose over some of these headphones these days that are very competitive everywhere, noise canceling, sound quality, and you can find them for less these days. So overall, the H95, I'm personally a fan of these headphones, but the truth is they're flawed. They're not perfect. They are a bit older and dated at this point, and there's just so much more innovation and competition that's come out since 2020. So it's really hard for me to recommend these headphones, honestly, unless you're looking at them for a discount. If the price does go down, the market price brand new, or if you find these used or in like new condition refurbished, then I think these start to make a case for being an attractive headphone. Thanks for watching and happy listening.